Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on the planet. And it's been a while since I've done one of these. I know that some of you are not used to seeing me with facial hair, or you've never seen me with facial hair. Some of you don't know me, some of you do. Some of you will be viewing this on this platform that I'm recording this on originally. Some of you might have this sent to you by a friend via WhatsApp or on Telegram. But wherever you are, however you hear this, I hope you've all had a lovely week. And today we're going to talk about, progressivism, or the failure of progressivism. I think that the dust has settled a little bit after the elections in America, and maybe now we can engage in this conversation without it stirring up too many bad feelings, or maybe stirring up too much of a fight. If it happens, so be it. And the lovely part is I'm someone who's actually very easy to reach in terms of communication, and I welcome discourse, so if anything I say today displeases you or triggers thoughts and you want to engage in discourse, well, welcome. And like I said, I'm easy to reach. Now, we're having this conversation because more and more, maybe what we could have looked at in the past as minor skirmishes between ideologies have been turning more and more into full-on battles, maybe even a war of ideologies, more and more. And I think that it's important to have conversations like this, which might be difficult, so that we don't actually divide ourselves. At the end of the day, the exchange of ideas and thoughts is important, but these are things that shouldn't divide human beings, or at least that's my thought. And another reason I'm doing this is because I have a lot of female friends who talk about the things they believe in and share their thoughts openly. And I also saw this one Mizrahi guy, Arsim, he copied me. I'm the only one that does talks like this in their tank top and sits there vaping. So I will not stand for this Arsim copycat. And in fact, if he's angry, or all the Arsim are, they should know that I could take all of them with one hand tied behind my back. And like I said, easy to find. Some of your Arsim friends might send this to you and share it, and please come. But now let's talk about progressivism and why many working class people have moved away from the progressive movement. And as I speak to you, yes, a lot of this will at times be my words, but I also have a wide variety of interesting friends. In my opinion, a lot of them brilliant human beings, and I correspond with a variety of people. I think sometimes some of my friends realize that Manuel might be a little busy, or I would argue maybe a little lazy, but mostly busy. And by good luck, sometimes conversations or even thoughts I've had with them, or maybe even independently with other people, I'll find that one of my friends has done some of my work for me and put some of the thoughts that may have even been in my head down on paper, and then it's only my job to maybe add a little bit here, or maybe even remove some things. And in this case, I can't take full credit for this conversation. You'll be hearing my words, but also the words of Dr. Sonu Bhaskar. So thank you for this, Sonu, and I warned you that I would give you credit. Please, if anyone's displeased, do not bother Sonu. He's a very busy man. Bother me instead. But let's dive into why the working class has been moving away from progressive politics. So one thing to keep in mind is life happens for you, not to you. As you've noticed, this is not all one take. But life happens for you, not to you. But why does progressive politics, or why do progressive politics often feel like something happening to people, rather than something happening with them? For years, progressivism was a movement defined by empathy, by standing shoulder to shoulder with everyday struggles and everyday people. But for some, it now feels like a movement that's drifted away from its roots, inching more and more towards an elite echo chamber. Consider climate activism, for example. Originally, it emerged as a grassroots movement, a grassroots cry for environmental stewardship. Yet today, many feel as if it's become a stage for corporate endorsements and celebrity spokespeople and political grifters like Greta Thunberg. The working class bears much of the burden, but finds little voice in the conversation. Take, for instance, the experience of a construction worker trying to make ends meet. And this is not a random example. Real people were asked for their experiences, and names are just being withheld because sometimes people might not want to talk to you if they know that their name and identity will be out there. Not everyone is Emmanuel. This construction worker, he supports the environment, but worries more about rent and feeding his family, more about how he's going to educate his children, clothe them, than he is about installing a pricey eco-friendly appliance. He has other concerns. The discourse seems very distant from the reality. He says, yes, of course, I want a cleaner world for my children, for my grandchildren, but I have to get by today. Policies that overlook these practical, everyday concerns, even when they're well-meaning, can create very deep-seated resentment. And it isn't just climate issues. This takes on many different facets, and prepare yourselves, this won't be an easy conversation. So progressive spaces at times have become exclusive spaces, where even well-intentioned questions are met with condescension, or judgment. People have felt sidelined in movements they once trusted. And obviously this makes it very hard to engage in discourse and very hard to actually exchange thoughts in a civilized manner that will actually help us solve some of society's problems. One thing we can look at is the pandemic, for example. Progressive leaders called for strict lockdowns that were framed as being for the collective, and I do believe in the collective good. But in many cases, the toll was very heavy. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't all work together to ensure that we have healthy, safe societies, but like I said before, people, everyday people, should be considered. Small businesses shuttered, while big corporations gained even more ground. And I'm not anti-business, I'm not anti-wealth, I'm not a communist or a socialist, but this is the reality of things. So take, for instance, a hairdresser in a small town who lost her shops during these mandates. And these are her words. They say we're all in this together, but that's easy to say when you don't lose your livelihood. Her words reflect a sense of policies done to people, rather than for them. The point isn't to critique collective responsibility. It's to recognize that policies should empathize with people's lives on the ground, not merely serve some vague higher cause at their expense. It shouldn't just be about the greater good. What about good for the common man or for the individual? The same way we should all as individuals look out for the good of the societies around us and the other people that we live in society, I think society should also look out for the individual. Our policymakers should look out for the individual. It shouldn't just be about the vague mass of humanity, because we aren't part of this. We are part of humanity, but we aren't just random parts or random vague entities within the mass. We are people, we are all individuals. And I'll ask you to bear with me because it might seem like we're going through this very quickly at a breakneck speed, but this is merely to stimulate thought, and like I said, I welcome dialogue, and I'm fairly easy to find in terms of communication correspondence, so if anyone has any thoughts or pushback, you're welcome to provide it. Identity politics has also taken a complex turn. Instead of celebrating unique lives, it sometimes feels like there's a pressure to fit into predefined categories. The push for simplicity, ironically, can feel reductive, and I would argue is reductive. A truck driver once shared his frustration. He says, "I'm not just a Latino voter, I'm a father, a truck driver, and a person of faith." For those of you who are American voters and participated in the election recently, it might have been frustrating to be put in these little boxes. If I had been participating, it would have frustrated me to be counted as a young black male voter, when there's more to me, and with every human, we're multifaceted individuals. We're not just this one thing that can easily be defined. So with our truck driver, instead of feeling recognized, he felt boxed in. And how many others feel the same? Simplifying people to labels risks pushing them away from the very movement that's meant to empower them. Simplifying another human being to a racial classification diminishes who the person is. When identity is oversimplified, it overlooks the individual and loses connection with their real concerns. Because, like I said, people are multifaceted, so while someone might identify with Latino concerns, there might be other concerns that are not addressed by them being classified as merely Latino. But, again, this doesn't mean that progressivism is bad, but so far these are just a few of the small issues. Language has now also become a battleground, and I would actually argue that we're in the age of linguistic warfare. Terms like racist or fascist get thrown around, sometimes a little too carelessly and casually, sometimes as quick labels for anyone who dissents. And this phenomenon, where people are given labels that are thrown around rather carelessly, can alienate rather than educate. A young teacher shared how she was criticized for questioning certain curriculum changes. Despite her open-mindedness, the backlash was swift and severe. She felt silenced in a space she had once trusted. And one could argue there are some curriculum changes that people are fighting that might not be for the best reasons, as in the sense that their argument against these curriculum changes are maybe purely based on moralist panic. But for example, fighting against curriculum changes that lead to Holocaust revision, for example, and Holocaust revision obviously leads to a rise in anti-Semitism, I would argue asking those questions is a good thing. And academia is normally a place where hard conversations are had. Is progress truly served by shutting down conversations, or by labeling these questions as ignorance or intolerance? The result is quite often alienation and a silent exodus, which we witnessed, and some of you are asking yourself where it came from. Once a place for critical thought and change, some progressive spaces have embraced establishment norms, with celebrities and megacorporations as key advocates. A movement of the people now seems dominated by a few voices. Many recall watching billionaires speak about sacrifice from stages surrounded by luxury and opulence, to a person working 2, maybe 3 jobs, to support a family, this type of advocacy feels far removed from the everyday sacrifices that they already know too well and that they make every day and have to think about every day. Large corporations now fund progressive causes, but where does that funding truly go? To ads and campaigns, not always to community-driven action. And it's a message that can feel hollow, and not only does it feel hollow, it is hollow and empty. A factory worker expressed it well. They donate millions to causes, but won't raise our wages. Corporate-backed advocacy often fails to resonate with people whose lives they impact daily. At its best, progressivism stood for freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom to question, freedom to go against the grain. Today, however, dissent is often met with social backlash instead of open dialogue. Many grew up admiring the progressive ideals of free thought, myself included. I openly say that I am right-wing, but not on the far right, and I'm a social libertarian. So while I do believe in what many would refer to as traditional libertarian ideals, I do believe that we, all of us, have a duty to ensure that social inequality is something that is managed in our societies, and if we truly can, in an ideal world, close the gap as much as possible. If we could eliminate it, that would be wonderful. But now when people voice different perspectives, they can feel ostracized, and they are ostracized, rather than allowed to participate in the conversation and be heard. A small business owner, for example, questions certain pandemic mandates. Though he was far from anti-science, he was met with criticism. And I will admit, for example, on the right, especially the far right, that there are a number of anti-science attitudes, and this is a problem. But this man's story highlights the value of choice and personal decision-making. And again, the previous point about labels being thrown around a little too carelessly. For a movement rooted in empathy, progressivism can sometimes feel very quick to judge. Many who want to support progressive ideas find themselves sidelined if they express even mild disagreement. The issue of globalism, for example, comes into play, and I openly admit I am a globalist. I believe in a more interconnected world, and I do believe that we are all interconnected. While advocating for international justice is vital, some local communities feel left behind as resources and attention are shifted away from their communities or their countries and shifted abroad. Now, please take, for example, a single mother from the Midwest. It's easy to see why a shift feels so personal, and in this case I mean the Midwest in the US. Her concern isn't anti-globalism, or that she's anti-globalism. It's simply a desire for her community to also be prioritized, to be cared for, to not be forgotten. The road to change often starts at home. If progressivism truly seeks to make a difference, it must remember the people in its own backyard, not just those across borders. Those turning away from progressivism aren't anti-progress, and they should not be labeled as that in a flippant and careless manner. They are pro-voice, pro-respect, and they want their voices to be heard. They want to be respected. I'm grateful that there's people who think about people in other parts of the world. That is important. But what about the voices in your own backyard? Do you respect your countrymen and their plight? If the answer is no, then how can you truly serve someone else thousands of miles away from you? So these people I've described, they want solutions that don't feel out of reach, policies that align with real everyday lives, their lives. A return to the roots of progressivism means reconnecting with working class people, respecting their stories and the experiences that they bring to the table. And this would not be a regression. This would be a renewal, because so far, I would argue that much of the good that the progressive movement brings to the table is fading away. This would bring that back. A people-centered movement isn't one for people. It is a movement with people. Progressivism doesn't need to abandon its ideas. It simply needs to recenter on genuine local empathy, while still looking out at the greater world around it, because, like I said, we are all interconnected. What affects me will affect you, and what affects you will eventually find its way back to me. Building true progress means moving beyond labels, moving beyond petty, often weaponized labels that are used as tools to crush dissent, and embracing each person as an individual with their own thoughts, their own opinions, and their own way of looking at the world. It requires listening, not lecturing, though I realize I might be lecturing you, but yes, listen in this case. Then you can say, Manuel, stop lecturing us, but only after you've listened to me. It requires humility, not hierarchy. Self-reflection is a powerful tool. Like I said, I'm on the right wing, but I recognize many of the problems that the right wing currently has and has had for a while, and I'm also able to recognize a lot of the good in the left and a lot of the good within the progressive movement and within progressive ideals. True accountability begins within, not by pointing fingers, but by ensuring our own ideas and our own ideals and worldview actually hold up to scrutiny. Progressivism's legacy is profound. It's a legacy that can inspire and elevate. And it has inspired many, and it has elevated many. It has inspired those who even today call themselves progressives, and even those who aren't. At first, it must reconnect with real lives, with real voices, and with real people, and with a willingness to listen to them. To move forward, progressivism needs to come down from the mountaintop and walk side by side with those that it serves, not merely for vague, grand ideals, but for grounded, practical solutions that are centered on human beings, on people, on individuals, on local communities, not just on the greater mass of humanity. As life unfolds for us, rather than to us, perhaps it's time for progressivism to refocus as a movement that is open, empathetic, and authentically connected to the people that it represents, or I would say it claims to represent. Real change is a shift in perspective away. With responsibility, compassion, and community at its heart, progressivism can again become the movement that uplifts all. And I asked this question, and even Sonu has asked this question, and I'm sure many others have as well. Can progressivism return to its roots as a movement truly by and for the people, or has it drifted too far? And this is a question that I would argue only progressives can answer at this moment. I'm not a progressive. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't care about what happens within the progressive movement. We all actually should. At the end of the day, we aren't divided by our politics, and we shouldn't be divided by our politics. We are more than just progressives and libertarians and the far right. We are more than Democrats and Republicans. We are more than Jews and Muslims and Christians and Hindus and etc. We are more than just black, white, Latino, or Asian. We're human beings, and unity is our strength. The world we have around us today that we've been able to build is because of that unity. Should we forget what our strength is as human beings, we will all suffer. Should we divide ourselves, we will all perish. I never thought I'd be quoting the Christian Bible, but a house divided amongst itself cannot and will not stand. And this is a reality. Our world, like I told you, has been built because of our unity. It will crumble around us. Right now the world is changing. We seem to be more and more divided. And I dare you to look around and come back and tell me that, Emmanuel, there's nothing wrong. Everything is fine. This is not what I see, and this is not what many see. The only way forward is to unite, even in our differences, and look for solutions to the problems that face us. Or there is no future for us. We will truly perish. Now, I'm not saying that in an overly dramatic way, and yes, this is a bit of a hyperbolic statement, but the consequences of this division are seen already, and they're being felt already. Imagine what awaits us if we continue down this path. There are some who talk about making America great again, or Argentina great again, or the UK great again. But none of this matters if the earth, if humans are not great again. Many of us look to our past and can point to times where humans knew greatness. This doesn't have to be something in our past. We can be great again, right here and now in the present, and even in the future. But we do have to make a choice. We do have to sit down and have difficult conversations. We must not push each other away. Even if we do not like a conversation, even if we do not disagree, even if we do not agree with it, we must still be willing to have these conversations. And it's why I even said, if you take offense at my words or statements today, or if you agree, or think Emmanuel's a complete dumbass, please, I welcome the pushback. Let's engage in conversation. This is what's needed. Share this with your friends, your neighbors, your parents. Engage in conversation with them, whether they're on the left or the right, and truly listen to each other. I wish you all a lovely weekend, and remember, so I wasn't lying when I said that this is more than one take, but unity is what made humans great. Please don't forget that. And our division is what threatens to tear our world apart right now. If humans will be great once more, we must remember our unity, we must remember our strength. I bid you farewell, and like I said, have a lovely weekend.